because it's like
Oh, I think
determined.
that's probably going to be it. We can get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Burnside, and today we're here. We're going to talk about podcasting. This is a talk I've given for the last 3 years here at TechPHX. Before it was called TechPHX, it was called PodCamp. A lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today can be found at this website here called imadeapodcast.com. Just a little bit of review. Anybody here have a podcast currently? Nice. Kind of, sort of is okay. I've been podcasting since 2005. Just hit our 7-year anniversary on our show. We have about 5,000 listeners. We talk about Mini Coopers once a week. Gets me to do really cool stuff like trips to Europe and all expense paid trips across the United States in brand new Mini Coopers, which is a lot of fun. All because I do a podcast, which is pretty awesome. To do a podcast, I'm sure since a lot of you already do podcasting here, there's 3 main things that you need to do in making a podcast. It's the 3 P's, basically. You need to produce, you need to publish, and you need to promote. A problem I see with a lot of podcasters, I give this talk and people say, I'm going to start a podcast, and they don't follow through, is because somewhere in one of those 3 steps, they get hung up. They get hung up in the process. They get hung up in just fiddling with random crap that keeps them from either producing a show, publishing their show, or promoting their show. First thing you have to do is you have to produce a show. I recommend doing it on a Mac, but that's just because I like to do things the easy way, and I don't like to do things the nerd way. Doing it on Windows, you have to have special software. You have to download a program called Audacity. Audacity is really fiddly, really fussy, prone to crashing, and it's difficult to get set up. Once it's set up, it works great, but it's not that hot. GarageBand is much better. It's easier to use, a little bit more stable. Also on the Mac, it's easier to record Skype conversations. If you want to do a show with interviews or with other people that aren't in the same room as you, I'm a big fan of using Skype for that. And it just makes things simpler. You can do it on a PC, but I have a feeling a lot of people who start making podcasts, they're doing it on a PC and they get lost in the process. Good morning.
Good morning. We ran late on
That's
the
quite all right. That's quite all right. We just got started.
What do you use for Skype recording?
I use a program called Audio Hijack Pro by the nice guys over at Rogue Amoeba Software. It's brilliant, and it's $30. And it is the best $30 I've ever spent in my entire life. And you can, in fact, the show that I do, it's 4 or 5 of us, and we are across the United States. I'm here in Arizona, one of my guys in Detroit, one's in Kansas City, and 2 are in Chicago. None of them are in the same room. We do the entire show over Skype, and it's recorded with Audio Hijack. And then we can go through and we edit it in GarageBand or whatever my producer, whatever he edits, and I forgot what he does. I use GarageBand personally, or you can edit in whatever you like. Doing it on Windows we used to do it on Windows. And it was a frustrating process, and finally he just said, I'm just going to do it on my Mac instead, and it's just smooth sailing after that. Also why I switched from Windows to a Mac. Highly recommend doing that. So you have to produce a show, and you have to talk about stuff to produce a show, and you have to know what you want to talk about. So who's doing a podcast now? What do you guys talk about?
Mostly nerds.
Mostly nerd stuff. Nerd stuff's good. It's a good topic to talk about podcasts. A lot of people like to listen to other people talk about stuff they like, especially when it's nerd stuff. How long have you guys been doing your show?
The main one has been 3 months now.
Excellent. How many listeners do you have?
Almost 1,000.
Wow. Nicely done. What's the name of your show?
Nerd of the day.
Nerd of the Day.
Yeah.
Like .net. .net. I like that. Well, everybody go check it out. Subscribe on iTunes. Very cool stuff. So yeah, you have to produce a show, and that's the one part where everybody gets hung up. If you don't produce a show, you're not a podcaster. That's how it goes. You have to have something, and you have to be passionate about what you want to talk about. So you produce a show, and once that's done, you have to be consistent. That's the other thing. One thing that we have done with my particular show for 7 years is it's very consistent. We record on the same night every week, and we have for 7 years. Every Thursday at 9 p.m. Central Time, we are all in front of our computers recording a show. And it's been that way since the beginning of time for us. Every Thursday, the show's released every Monday. My listeners know that every Monday night, Tuesday morning, they're going to have a new show on their iTunes feed that they can download and listen. And it's like clockwork. That is super duper important. It doesn't matter how long your show is. It doesn't matter what you talk about. What's important is being consistent. Making sure that your show has a regular schedule. Think of it like television. You know that at 8 o'clock on Monday night, Castle comes on. And you're going to be on your sofa watching Castle at 8 o'clock on Monday night, or you're not going to watch it. You have to watch it tomorrow, or something like that. That's the way we used to think before the advent of DVRs. Podcasts are like that. Make sure you're on a consistent schedule. If you're going to do a show once a week, pick a day, and make sure your show is always up on that day, at whatever time you specify. You have to train your listeners. Multiple times a week, daily, doesn't matter. The length, how often you post a show, just make sure it's consistent. Very, very important. Also, when producing your show, very important, again with consistency, is you want to have a solid intro that never changes except for your show number and maybe a date. So it mentions the name of your show, what the topic of the show is, the number of the show, and then you also want to throw in any sponsors that you might have after that. The whole bit should take less than 10 seconds. And it should be the first thing they hear. When someone hits play on your podcast, if they don't hear your voice first, you're not going to retain your listeners. Because they're not going to know what the hell they're listening to. If the first thing they hear is the first 3 chords from a Van Halen song, they'll be like, this is a Van Halen song, I thought it was a podcast. First thing you need, nothing drives me battier. First thing when I hit play on a podcast is I should hear the host voice. That's how it should go. You're listening to World Famous White Roof Radio, webcast number 445 for Monday, November whatever, 2010, 2012. And it might take you 3 or 4 tries to do your intro. But make sure that's first. Hear your voice first. Keep it short, less than 10 seconds, and then use any intro music that you like. And do it the same way every time, without fail, because then it gets people comfortable, and they like that. Yes,
Is
ma'am?
that the date of the show that it's going to be published, or the date of the recording?
The date is going to be published.
Okay.
Yeah. You can say it's recorded on, like if, for example, I'll use Leo Laporte a lot in today's examples, because he makes $1 zillion making podcasts, and he does it in the radio style, and I like the way he does, like the way he works. But he doesn't give the show date. He gives the date that the show was recorded on, which is essentially his show dates, because his shows go live the same day he records. Because he's a gazillionaire and has a big staff of like 300 people working in the brick house up in Petaluma, which is nice. So consistency. Intro the same every time. First thing you hear should be your voice, one of the host's voice of the show, title of the show, the number of the show if you want to do that, the date of the show if you want to do that, and then any sponsors after that. An outro is also very important, and that's the last thing that is done at the end of the show, and that is where you remind people that they can find you in iTunes, they can email you with questions or leave notes in the show notes on your blog or whatever. But another key part is you want to make sure it's consistent. So you want it to always be pretty much like your outro, but different because it's at the end. And realize too that most people listening to podcasts, they don't get that far into the show. They just don't. I've got statistics that show that 30% of the listeners of my show don't listen to the last 5 minutes. They just stop. Because they go, okay, it's the end of the show, I'm just going to stop listening. So if you have anything really important to say it at the top of the show. Don't say it at the end. Or say it at both, just in case. Because your raving fans are going to listen to the whole show. Consistency is key. Timing, like I said, a lot of people will argue with me about this, but it really doesn't matter how long your show is. Your show is going to be as long as your show needs to be. But make sure it's the same length every time. Don't do a 2-hour show today, and then next week put out a 15-minute show. Or a 15-minute show today, and then a 15-minute show, and then a 15-minute show, and then a 2-hour show. Don't do that. Pick a time, say, we want to do an hour show. Then do an hour show. Some people are going to say, oh, that's too long. Yeah, that's crap. Your show needs to be as long as your show needs to be. Okay? But just make sure you're consistent with it. That it's always the same length, or close to it, plus or minus 10 minutes. Super important. Intro, outro, and length. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Who has questions so far? Yes?
Like intro music, short or long?
Short. Nobody cares what your musical tastes are. They just want you to, they subscribe to your podcast because they're interested in what you have to say. They aren't interested in the music choices that you've made unless you're doing a podcast about music, right? So my whole intro for my show is from the time you hear my voice until the time you hear my voice again introducing the other hosts is usually 30 seconds. And that includes the full intro, all my sponsors, and then it's about a 10-second music break, and then we start. And it all fits, and it's the way the music piece works out. That's just kind of makes sense, and it's the way we've always done it. About 30 seconds. Yes?
Now you're talking about the intros and the host or whatever being the first thing you hear. Well, we run more than one podcast, so we have
Like a network bumper in front.
Yeah.
I get that, that's okay too, as long as it's a voice and not music.
Yeah, it's,
Because I've subscribed to podcasts and I instantly unsubscribe because the first thing you hear is music.
I hate when the first thing you hear is really loud, obnoxious put the earbud.
Yeah, it's
Oh, Jesus.
no. You have to keep in mind, people are listening to podcasts at the gym, right? And they're not looking at their screen on the phone on their screen, or they're listening on like an iPod Shuffle that doesn't have a screen, or on some other device, or it's in their pocket, or it's strapped to their arm. They're just listening, and you want to make sure that they know what's coming up without having to actually go, "What the hell is this?" You know, not cool. Consistency. Yes. Okay, so you have to produce a show. Like I mentioned, you can't be a podcaster unless you produce a show. It's very key. The next part is you have to publish your show. And this, I think, is the part where everybody gets hung up. Because they spend too much time fiddling and fussing and messing about, and they really shouldn't. That's a big, big issue. First of all, number one thing I recommend for podcast websites is WordPress. Everybody here uses WordPress on their podcast? No? What do you guys use?
We went from WordPress to Squarespace, though.
Squarespace works too. Squarespace works too for those of you who have a bigger budget. Squarespace is super nice. But if you're just getting started, I recommend WordPress. WordPress makes it simple. WordPress with very, very few plugins. You don't need a lot of plugins. Plugins keep you from getting stuff done. It gives you too much stuff to fiddle and fuss with. Okay? You need WordPress. You need a podcast plugin. There's a couple of them that are really nice. You need that. And you need to set that up. And some kind of a player, or get a theme that's got the HTML5 audio player built into it, something like that. It requires nothing. It doesn't require 150 plugins on your WordPress site. You get like 3 is all you need, and you're done. And then once it's set, leave it alone. Stop playing with your plugins. Don't waste all your time tweaking your website, because what that does, that's taking you from producing a show and publishing a show, and all of a sudden you're becoming a webmaster. Don't be a webmaster, be a podcaster, right? Set up your website, get it going, get it set, so that all you have to do is go and post your show. Done. You also have to be in iTunes, and I hate that, but you do, because that's how everybody listens to podcasts. You can be in all these other directories, you can search for podcast directories all you want, you can put your show in all those directories, but none of those will get you any listeners like iTunes does. Just all there is to it. Everybody, they know, even people that are on Android know that they have to open iTunes to get podcasts. There's a couple of others in there too that you want to be on. One's called Stitcher Radio. You can sign up and they will bring your podcast into that app, which is really nice. It's like a radio listening app. A lot of people use that. You get some great stats from that. And another one is, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'll come back around to it.
Blog Talk Radio.
Blog Talk Radio is crap. Don't use that. Don't use it. If you want your voice to sound like you're talking on a telephone, then use Blog Talk Radio. Don't.
Oh, there's no way to just publish it to it?
No, you can't publish it. You have to use their stuff. I mean, you won't get any listeners over there anyway. We're going to come back around to that. Publish. Don't be a webmaster. Don't fiddle and fart with them. Don't change themes. Don't tweak plugins or spend all your time looking for plugins or tweaking plugins or any of that stuff on your WordPress blog. Set it up and let it go. That's it. Yes?
Can you mention some of the plugins Would you recommend, so I don't have to spend a lot of time?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a new list over at imadeapodcast.com. I usually do it with no plugins. You need some kind of an audio player. I recommend using FeedBurner, but the status of FeedBurner is currently up in the air, so I really can't recommend using FeedBurner, which makes me sad. But at the same time, I still recommend using FeedBurner. FeedBurner.com is a free service provided by Google that they've almost entirely ignored, but it's the easiest way to get your show into iTunes, even though there are a lot of missing fields that Apple has upgraded iTunes to support that FeedBurner does not. It's still, if you want your show on iTunes and you want to do it really quick, really fast, FeedBurner works. Podpress, I think, is the one made by Blueberry. I have to double check that. But they also will help you create your feed so that it's easy and nice for iTunes, which you have to have. And then the audio player, some kind of statistics package. I recommend Jetpack on WordPress. Even if you're not running a podcast, you should be using Jetpack, because Jetpack has a lot of really neat features that you can put into your WordPress account. Really nice. Share buttons, contact form, comments that are linked to Twitter and Facebook, all manner of things, plus some really decent site stats. You won't get download stats. That's what you need the other plugin for. And of course, something to prevent your site from getting spammed, like Kismet is all you need. And once your site is set up, the point is you just need to leave it set up so that all you have to do is you log into your website and you post your show. And then once your show gets posted, then that goes out to wherever it needs to go. If you spend all your time fussing and farting around with your website, you're not going to publish your show. And if you don't publish what you've recorded, you're still not a podcaster, because nobody can get it. It's not there. Hey, look, I made the show. It's sitting on my hard drive. I made a podcast. Oh yeah, not really, because you got to do the whole thing. And the last bit is promotion. You can produce a podcast, you can publish a podcast, and then, hello, you're a podcaster. But if you don't tell anybody that it's there, it's just going to sit there and you're not going to get anybody to listen. You have to promote. And when you promote, you can do that 150 different ways. Usually you know within your niche where you need to go to promote. You're already a member of a message board or a Facebook group or some kind of a Twitter message thread or maybe a Reddit group, something like that, where you're already kind of a big deal, where you're already kind of an expert. That is where you want to go to promote your show. Because you want to go to where your listeners are. You don't want to, if you're doing a podcast about Mini Coopers, for example, like I do, I'm not going to post links to my show on a website about Volkswagens or a website about, I wouldn't go to like a Greenpeace website where they're like anti-car and post links to my website, my podcast about cars. Doesn't make any sense, right? Who has questions so far? Awesome. What do you guys do to record a show? Do you guys do it all in the same room?
Both. It depends on the week.
What do you use to record?
Unfortunately, we are on PC.
Yeah.
I recorded an episode on Mac. Very, very much easier.
Very much easier.
But
Use Audacity?
yes, for PC, if we do any after edits, it's all on Audacity.
Yeah.
And then you have to have a shit ton of plugins to get it in different formats, which is also a pain in the ass. And it does crash.
Nightmare.
Also, it's got a zooming problem with it too. You try to zoom in the waves, and all of a sudden it'll get stuck.
Yeah.
So you can't get back out. But
If you're doing a podcast on Windows, you gotta want it.
yeah,
And you really do.
Yeah.
And you gotta want it. And then you finally just get tired of it, and you just go, screw it, I'm just gonna go buy a Mac. And you just go buy a Mac. A Mac Mini's all you need. They're $600. Boom, done. You already have a monitor and a keyboard and mouse. And it comes out of the box. You can take a Mac out of the box, plug in a microphone, and record your podcast without doing anything else. You take the Mac out of the box, you plug in a microphone, you start GarageBand, which is built in, and you talk. And then you edit, you put in your intro music and blah, blah, blah. You put it out to iTunes. iTunes converts it to MP3. You put your show image there. Boom. Drag it to the desktop. Done. Upload it somewhere. You are a podcaster. It's cool. Yeah. It really is, yes.
Well, I had a Mac Mini last year when I came
Yes.
to PodCamp.
Yes.
And we got started, we got a really nice mic, we got everything all set up. We did our first effort at recording and it was all fuzzy sound. Now, I went out and bought some styrofoam to put in the window and back of the door and try and help with the sound issue. But we just didn't, we weren't able to get over that.
It was probably the mic that you used, and it was probably the way it was connected. There's another part of podcasting that a lot of people get stuck on, get frustrated with, and end up becoming a podcaster, is gear selection or gear setup. When you're first starting off, all you need is a USB mic, maybe. You might be unfortunate to have one of the voices that does not work well with USB mics. For example, if you were to listen to any of the Amber Miller podcasts, not Amber Miller, Amber, what the hell's her name from Canada? She's on the other side.
Amber Mac.
Yes, Amber Mack. If you listen to any of her older podcasts when she was using a Snowball USB mic, they're horrendous. She's got the voice that doesn't work well with a USB microphone. It just doesn't sound nice. That's just my opinion. And I've got a guy on my show whose voice doesn't sound nice with the USB mic. So I had to send him proper gear. But most of everybody can use a USB microphone. You plug it in, your recording software will see it, and you should be able to record from it. You should also be able to hear yourself while you're talking. The first time you do this, it's very discerning, and it's weird to be hearing the sound of your own voice when you talk. But after about 10 times, you miss it if you don't have it. Because then you think, what's wrong? I can't hear myself. So it's really important that you can monitor yourself as you talk. Literally listening to the sound of your own voice.
Yeah.
And you're going to sound weird. Oh, you are going to hate the sound of your voice the first time you do it. It's like, that's what I sound like. Oh God, how can anybody talk to me if I sound like that? Right? But then everybody, but they keep listening, so you must be doing something right. People must not mind the sound of your voice. USB microphone's all you need. That's another thing, like I said, that'll get you hung up on making a podcast, is spending too much time stressing and fiddling with gear and other things, right? The whole object, if you're passionate about a subject, so passionate that you want to record your voice and share it with others, then you should make that process as simple as possible, right? And then you also need to make it consistent. A USB headset works great for most people. Once you get started, and also keeps your budget low, especially if you're just now starting off, you don't want to spend $1,000 on stuff. But you go and you get a nice USB headset for like $50. Those Logitech ones, a gaming rig, works really nice. Or one of the Plantronics ones with a little fiber optic thing that comes out and you look like Garth Brooks on stage. Put on a cowboy hat, really. If you want. That's all you need. You don't need mixers and condensers and any other piece of gear that all these radio guys who say they're podcasters or podcast experts say that you need to have. You don't need that. Hell, you don't need anything. If you've got a laptop, like if you get a Mac, it's got a built-in microphone, you could use that. Just make sure you put in some headphones, because otherwise you get feedback. It sounds weird. It's not the greatest microphone in the world, but it will allow you to record the sound of your voice, which is producing a show, which will then you can then record it, edit it, publish it, and promote it. That's all you need. The other stuff is just the other stuff, and it just costs money. Why spend a lot of money for something you're not even sure you're going to do? Most people that start a podcast, they don't make it past a dozen shows. You can go into iTunes, you can just search for any particular topic, and you will find shows that have 10, 15, 20, 30 episodes. And then they don't have anything else. And that was all 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. They haven't published a show in a year. They've done what everybody calls pod fade. One of the most ridiculous terms ever invented. And I hate it.
That's like the Fat Lip.
Scott Fletcher did that. Horrible term. But that's what it is. It's you get bored with it, or the process is too difficult, and you just stop. It's like, man, I can't be bothered. But I mean, you started for a reason, so why not just make it simple? Does that make sense, right? That's the way I do it. I like things to be simple. I have to deal with hard during the day. I'm an IT guy by day, and I don't want to have to fiddle and fuss with my crap when I get home. I want my stuff to work. So, produce, publish, promote. Promoting, another thing with promotion is you have to, and this is also hard for a lot of podcasters because on a whole, we're a bunch of stare at our shoes and look at our phone people. Right? I'm a podcaster. You can't be a hardcore, socially inept nerd and do a podcast. You just can't. You just can't. You're gonna want to interview people for your show because your listeners are gonna want to hear interviews. So you're gonna have to be able to talk to other people. Right? I know that's awkward and I'm just being truthful. It's awkward for a lot of people to walk up and just talk to people. That's hard. But you have to be able to do that as a podcaster, because it's a neat thing. You have to be able to go to some kind of industry function that's specific to your niche and introduce yourself and hand out business cards about your show. Oh, by the way, hey, I do a show about this thing that we're doing. We do a podcast about this. So me and some guys, we talk for an hour a week. Here's a card. You have to be able to walk up somebody, stick your hand in their face, and say, hey, my name's Don Burnside. Whatever, great. It's really hard to do. But you get the best promotion out of face-to-face interactions. Because podcasting, like radio, is very, very personal. People are letting you into their head. Literally. They put headphones on and the sound of your voice comes into their head. And you're there. And they form a bond with you. It's very powerful, very, very powerful tool. And if you're good at it, it's an awesome thing. If you get a good follower base, it's really awesome. And the amount of power that you get from being in somebody's head for so long is fantastic. Because you can just direct people to do stuff that you want. And they'll do it, and they'll do it happily, because they're doing it because they're trying to support a thing that they love, because they have formed a complete bond with the sound of your voice. That's why people listen to Rush Limbaugh. Not that they might not like him, but they're used to the sound of his voice. And they like it in their head. And a lot of them just can't help themselves. Or anybody else that's ridiculous. Tom Likas. Who's heard of Tom Likas? Tom Likas, you guys heard of him? He's full jackhole. But he has more listeners than Adam Carolla.
I hate how he does the radio too. It's like, because he was here, they were rebroadcasting him here locally for a while.
Yeah.
And like, he has like these long pauses. And like,
Yeah,
it's
you know what?
like
Leo-
radio cutout or something. It's just like-
Leo does that.
I don't know. See,
I understand that,
with
and
Tom,
that's
I
their
don't notice it with Leo.
pause. That's their pause.
I don't notice it with Leo.
Yeah, he does it. He's not as bad as
Maybe
Tom
it's
Likas.
better because he's not just a talking head, because he has, he never does a show with just him.
Yeah, he does. In fact, his Tech Guy show on KFI in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Okay.
And you
I
can
use
listen
those.
to that on the Tech TV network, I think.
It's got a podcast career. Leo
Yeah,
needs
he
to
does,
stop
yeah.
kissing his dog on air.
And he doesn't need to stop kissing his dog. That's
Watching his live stream, like, come on, dude.
But I mean, anybody that you know has a show, for example, I personally can't stand the sound of Adam Carolla's voice. To me, it sounds like he's been gargling with razor blades and coal. And I just can't stand the sound of his voice. But that's me, and he has a ton of listeners. He has a lot of people that don't mind that sound, and he has a ton of listeners. Same with Howard Stern. Howard Stern is so popular that he took all of his listeners from regular radio and made them buy satellite radio accounts so they keep listening. And he still has millions of listeners just because people like him. You get the sound in your head, you form the bond, and then when you do something like move from terrestrial radio to satellite radio, people are going to say, yeah, I got to go because that's where my guy is. I got to have that sound in my head because that's what you're getting, which is really fun. Who here makes money from their podcast? Has a podcast now? You make a real live income, like
No,
live
not-
income,
not
enough to
no.
pay for the show?
Yes.
Excellent. If you think you're going to make a podcast to make $1 million,
Oh, hell no.
let me show you my book, How to Make Money at Podcasting. It's the only way you're going to make money in podcasting is by selling a book that says how to make money in podcasting. You aren't going to make any money. If you're lucky, you'll make enough to cover expenses.
Leo makes a lot
Leo's the exception to the rule. Adam Carolla, the exception to the rule. Anybody, if you go into iTunes and if you look at the top people in any given category, all of them are exceptions to rules because they're popularity, they're celebrity, or they have big corporate backing. In my category, for example, my show is consistently the #1 independent automotive podcast in iTunes. And I say independent because we don't have corporate backing like AOL, like Discovery Channel, like NPR. We don't have any celebrity like Adam Carolla does. So we don't have the cash of Autoblog because they've got the AOL backing. So it's just 4 guys talking about minis. And we beat all those shows all the time. You don't need corporate backing, but at the same time, we don't make a lot of money because we don't have 1 million listeners. That's the only way you're going to make money is having 1 million listeners. You will never make money at a podcast. What podcasting will get you is notoriety. You'll become an expert in the subject that you talk about. You'll become a known expert in the subject that you're talking about. People will refer to you as the guys about this, or the girls. That's what you get. And with that, you can use that to generate leads on your website, or blog posts, or whatever. You'll get more people to visit your website, maybe more people to buy your product. But if you think that you're going to make money on podcast advertising, you're not. Just not. I make just enough. For me, it's golf that's sponsored. That's all it is for me. So it's a nice hobby. I'd like it to be more, but for the time being, it's really hard for me to do because it's going to cost, for me to grow my show beyond what it is right now, is going to cost more money than I make in sponsorship. So I'm just like at a steady keel, and we get a couple, maybe 20 listeners new a month or something, not a big deal. But it works for me for now. And someday I'd like to grow beyond that, because that's going to cost real money to do. You have to do real marketing, blah, blah, blah. But I do have sponsors. Sponsors pay for my web hosting. Sponsors pay for gear upgrades for me and my hosts, which is nice. And an occasional cup of coffee from Dutch Brothers. Love those guys too. So that's gear, consistency. You're not going to make money. I had one other thing I was just going to go. I'm getting to that age now where I go to have a thought and it turns into nothing but a big black sunken hole back here in the back of my head.
Wait a few years, it gets worse.
I'm so excited about that. So excited about
You have
that.
Dutch Brothers as a sponsor. You
I
should.
don't. I wish
You
I could.
should, no.
They're only West Coast. Anyway, I made podcast.com. Most of all the stuff's already there, so I've given this talk a bunch of times. Consistency. I just can't hit that one home enough. Is you have to be consistent. Your show has to be the same length. Has to be the same length every time. Released on the same day every time. And the format of your show needs to be consistent. It might take you 10 shows to hammer it out. If you've not done a show, that's something else. We're going to come back to that. Okay, so same. If you don't have a show now, the first show that you do is going to suck. It really is. Fellas?
Yes.
Yeah.
First show? Sucked, right?
Yeah, audio's off, you hear noise in the background.
Yeah, but you know what? You got to suck it up, and you have to publish it because your first show is going to suck. Your first show might actually be your second show. Your first show might be so bad you might delete it and do it again. And that one's also going to be bad. It just is. And you know what? That's part of the process. Unless you're a trained radio professional with $10,000 worth of gear and a producer, if you're doing this on your own, your show is going to suck. The first 5 aren't going to be that great. After the 5th one, number 6, you'll be like, oh wow, this is actually getting pretty good. Because it's going to become easy. And your workflow is going to be smooth, and you're going to figure things out. And you're going to learn your microphone, and you're going to figure out how to speak to your microphone in such a way that it sounds nice. Or you're going to figure out the Skype settings correctly, or your recording settings correctly. Right? That's the way it is. And your show is going to evolve from that first show that's going to be not good up to about show 20. That's how long you have to stick with it. So if you're doing a weekly show, you have to commit for 20 weeks. Before it becomes the thing, before it becomes this awesome piece of awesome. That's what it takes. My show didn't get good till show 50. We had some nuggets before that. And the first 10 were just horrendous. 9 was okay. But they just weren't good shows. And, you know, and if you listen, go back and if you listen to like the old tech TV shows, Leo Laporte's first podcast, oh, bad. They weren't good. It was Leo listening to the sound of his own voice with a bunch of other guys that like hearing the sound of their own voice. And you have to get past that. You get to like show 15 or 20, and it's going to start turning into something really awesome. You guys probably found that out.
That's right where we are.
Yeah, and you're starting to feel right.
Yeah, where like you can actually go back and listen to it. You're like, yeah, and then you'll laugh at your own show.
Yes. If you can laugh, if you do funny stuff in your show and you laugh at your own show and you want to listen to your own show because it's funny, then you're doing a great job. That's all there is to it. Really simple. Who doesn't have a podcast here now?
I produce a bunch, but I don't.
But you don't actually make your own.
Yeah.
Excellent. Do you have any questions that are specific to get started with your show?
I know it's going to be farther off than I thought because all of my guests will be across the country in Massachusetts and
Sure.
New Jersey, and there's a little bit tied up right now.
There get time zone issues, and then you have the tech issues. The best thing for that is to use Skype. Skype is free. Get them to use Skype. It's free for them as well. You can use Skype to call them for very, very cheap. It costs nothing, and it's easier to record from Skype than buying some kind of a hardware solution like they use in a radio station. And a lot of people say, don't call on cell phones and don't use Skype to record. Now, you know what I say to that? It's crap. Call them on their cell phone and record it. Make a show.
One thing
It
that drives
sounds
me
nice.
crazy, you listen to podcasts, is when the speaker and the guest or the interview, they're at different levels, you know. I don't know, it just drives me nuts, you know.
I mean, you have Frog Pants Network, which is Scott Johnson, Scott Fletcher, Brian David, all those people, even Tom Merritt, and they use is Skype. That's the only thing they use. And as long as you can like relay on the other end to the side, like, hey, adjust your level up or adjust your level down, it can be brilliant.
Yeah.
Make sure you have bandwidth. Don't call somebody on the
So,
SL.
really quick, to come back to your point there.
And I don't have experience with stuff I've ever done.
This is a big deal where you will record something while you're talking on Skype, and you'll end up with mismatched levels. You'll sound louder than them, they will sound louder than you. That just happens. And all you can do is cuss at Skype. Really. But what the fix for that is you download an app called the Levelator. It's a free application, runs on the Mac and PC. And what you do is after you record your show, before you edit, run it through the Levelator. You just literally you take your file that you create and you just drop it on there, and it will just gives you a new file. But what it will do is it will make your levels even. Sometimes you get a little bit of noise in the background mixed in with that. So this, for me, I'm not a big fan of Levelator. I'd rather just fix it when we're actually doing the recording. But if it's really bad, run it through the Levelator and then work on your process to make it not so bad. Lower your volume. Plan an upgrade to using a mixer with a microphone as opposed to using a USB headset. That kind of thing.
Yeah, my son just won a mixer yesterday.
Beautiful. You can get a microphone to Musician's Friend for like $20.
You can't levelate music.
Yeah, you can't levelate
about
music.
that. So if you have audio on your intro and outro, like you usually keep that separate from levelator.
Correct. That's why if you're going to levelate, I say levelate before you edit.
And don't use an app that records directly to MP3.
Yes.
Yes.
Levelator
Levelator's only Wave.
Levelator will only work on Wave. That's correct. Yes.
I just got a Mac laptop, I have the mini.
Yes.
And on it, I forget the name of it, I used it once, is the function where I can talk to somebody, and can I use that instead of Skype if people have Mac?
Oh, like FaceTime.
Yeah, oh yeah, FaceTime,
I have
I've got
not-
a black hole there too.
You
Yeah.
can't use FaceTime would work. You can't record video from FaceTime. You
Oh,
can, but it's
yeah.
recording video from FaceTime is tricky. You need a giant hard drive and you need a fast internet connection. But you can probably record the audio using Audio Hijack Pro. Something else that somebody might want to try doing is having a live show. This sounds weird, having a live podcast. It's like, well, podcast, why would you want to do it live? You have listeners that want to be there and see the process. They want to see the nuts and the bolts. They want to hear the pre-show. They want to hear the post-show. They want to hear you guys cuss. The stuff that gets edited out. Right?
Behind the scenes.
The behind the scenes stuff. People love that. And they want, I mean, I'll post a show. We do it now. I've been doing this for so long. We've tried everything. We did Ustream. which was just, it's better now, from what I understand, but it's rough to use when you have multiple hosts. We've now switched using Google Hangouts. Google plus Hangouts on air. And then you post your video on your blog, on your website. You send people there via Twitter. They can watch. They can subscribe to YouTube. The thing with that, this is very important to keep in mind if you're going to use Google plus Hangouts for your show, for a live show, is remember that people are going to listen to your show. And they might not download it when you release that show. So I wouldn't recommend doing a live show all the time unless that's going to be your thing. For example, Evo and Jeff do their Books and Beer Hangout, and that's their thing. They're not doing an audio piece that they want to get in iTunes and want people to download on their iPhones and iPods. They're doing it there specifically for that. If you're doing a proper podcast and it's going into iTunes and you want people to download it and listen on their phones and their whatever, don't do live shows all the time. Because then people are just going to stop subscribing to your show. Do a live show once a month, maybe every other month. We just started doing once a month, just trying it out, see how it works. So it's a lot of fun. And people get to see the behind the scenes stuff. You know, and you record it the same way. We still use Audio Hijack to record the audio. And it sounds just fine. No trouble at all.
If you normally release just an audio podcast and you do a live stream video, people feel more connected to you.
They also feel more connected.
They get to see you, and
Exactly.
if you have the interactive chat while you're live streaming, you can bring them into the stream. You can have them be a participant.
The problem with chat, let me warn you about doing chat with a live show, is you will get distracted. It makes it rough for the host. If you're trying to record a show and you're reading the chat room at the same time, it's really hard. You end up with a lot of gaps in your show, and you have to edit a lot, and it sounds weird. So just keep that in mind. And doing chat with Google Plus is rough because people don't know where to comment, and there's no chat function on Google Plus, only the comment function. And so people try to use that as chat, and it's distracting also because the page is constantly reloading, or they'll leave comments over on your Facebook page or over on YouTube, and so you go, okay, well here I found this really cool chat plugin. I'm going to put this on my WordPress blog, but then your host shuts you down because it hammers one of your WordPress files too much because you're on a cheap, shared hosting plan. So doing chat's rough. I recommend kind of against it. Just do a show. Let people comment. That works. But that's really cool. Google Plus. Check it out. Levelator for when your volume levels don't match. It's free, Mac and PC. I think there may be a Linux version. Does anybody here roll on Linux? Okay, I'm disappointed. And then most everything that we talked about here today is over at imadeapodcast.com, and I'll be updating that probably later today, including a show that Evo Terra and I did last year. We actually made a podcast, which was a lot of fun. Did the whole process. It was neat. Does anybody have any other questions? Any other comments? Any other tips or tricks for others? Yes.
With PC,
Yes.
I might be missing an add-on or something with Audacity to capture from Skype.
Yeah, you need Pamela.
Yes.
Yeah, you need Pamela. And that costs like $20. You pay for it. Don't try to find anything free to record from Skype on the PC. It won't happen. And you'll just be pointing around and cussing on Twitter. Don't do it. Pay money. Pay money. There used to be a podcast app that for Windows that was kind of fun. It was like a little radio board, and it worked pretty okay, but it since disappeared, so I'm not going to tell you what the name was, but it was really neat.
I think you can also, it's like virtual wiretap or virtual wire or something. There's some way to do it.
There's always a bunch of ways. I only know about Pamela on Windows.
It's free, so if you're looking to not spend money, it's called CallNote.
Oh, okay.
You can install CallNote, but notice this, if you're doing any kind of video or something like that, there is their button, and you cannot move it when it's recording. It stays on the screen, you cannot minimize it, you cannot move it, it stays right there. Big CallNote, stop and start.
So it's one to check out though.
Yeah,
CallNote.
Click it for free.
Finally, the one last thing, and we'll just touch on this briefly, is actually hosting your show. MP3 files get large-ish. If you run an hour-long show, you're going to have files that are 25 megabytes in size. Not that big of a deal for your listeners. They don't care. If they like you, they'll download a gigabyte file of video, high def, 4K, whatever. But you're going to have to host those, and if you do a show long enough, you're going to have quite a collection. Currently, I think we have close to 700 pieces of audio on my server. and it takes up a lot of file space. So you have to keep that in mind when you're choosing a host. There's services that you can use. One of them is Libsyn, Libsyn. They will host your audio, video files for you. They will also provide you with a website if you so choose, statistics.
The other advantage of that too is if you self-host, like if you're on a shared host, the files download slow as hell.
They do,
So-
unless you've got a good host, but yeah,
Right,
they still
and
download really slow.
So it's, if you want to go with Libsyn or something like that, so that you don't have to worry about if someone's trying to download your show, like before they go on a drive or something like that, and they don't
Happens
get your
fast.
show because it's too slow to download.
And Libsyn charges nothing. For most people, it's like $20 a month for file hosting. It's a pretty good price, really. Get a sponsor. Get somebody to pay $20 a month to say their name on your show to pay for it.
If you do a weekly audio show, it's only $12 a month.
There you go. $12 a month for Libsyn. I'm a fan. Don't use them currently. I'm working towards that. But I have like 3 gigabytes of audio files.
Website too?
You can use them for a website as well. But you don't have to. You can use them as a content delivery network where you just link the show that you've uploaded to the Libsyn servers and then just let them handle your show. They'll give you stats on your show, how many times it was downloaded, all kinds of really cool stuff, and for not very much price.
They'll generate an RSS feed for you,
Yeah.
but as he recommended before, I would just recommend pointing that RSS to FeedBurner.
Yeah.
So you can use their RSS, but use FeedBurner to point to it, so that way if you sometime down the road decide to move away from Libsyn, you don't have to change your RSS feed.
Right.
You just point the new.
Yeah, you always want to, for your feed, you always want to use FeedBurner, or you want to use your domain name for your feed. You don't want to use feeds.libsyn.com because that's not you. You want it to be branded. Who has questions? Who has more comments?
Question.
Yes.
I kind of came in third wheel on a podcast.
Okay.
Some friends back in Ohio started it. I happened to roll into town,
Sure.
be in an episode. Got them online with them, just trying to hype it on Facebook and try and draw numbers back to the actual podcast.
Right.
I have questions about how to do that effectively, but also trying to set up distributed recording was enough trouble for the other two that it pretty much fell apart at that point.
Sounds like you're trying to do what's called a double or a triple ender, where everybody's trying to record their own end and mix it together at the end. Is that what you're trying to
Probably
do?
double, yeah.
Okay, don't do that.
Okay.
Don't do that. Save that for later. Are you an audio engineer?
Yeah.
Are either of those guys audio engineers? They are. Okay.
Well,
then-
one of them used to be a roadie.
Oh, really?
He's the main.
Okay, then maybe they can pull it off. Doing that's rough. I've never done it because I'm not an audio engineer. So I'm not the person to talk to you about doing that kind of a show. You'd be great quality if you can pull it off. Well, what he's talking about is every person on your show recording their end of the show. It's what's called a double ender or a triple ender if you have 3 people. The problem is there has to be a zillion problems because I don't actually do it that way, just because it seems really complex and complicated to me, and I don't like complex and complicated. I like easy. That's why we use Skype, because if I have to record, I can do the recording because I'm a smart guy. But I have 2 guys that are creatives on my staff. Literally, they are creatives. They're senior graphic designers for large firms in Chicago. Those guys are dumb, and I cannot get them to do that. It's beyond their skill set. They're creatives. They know Photoshop. You get them out of Photoshop, they don't know anything else. And so that whole process of recording your own self is rough if you're trying to share it with somebody else. You say, oh, this is how I do it. So for the interview, I'm going to need for you to download this application and buy this microphone, blah, blah, blah. No, don't do that. Just get Skype. It's rough.
Okay.
That's really hard.
So I just Skype into them.
Just
and,
Skype. Just ask one of them, have one of them Skype you in and be a part of their recording.
Okay.
That'd just be the easiest way. At least it would be for me. Unless they want to give you specific instructions on what they need from you to do. And file formats and what gear you're supposed to have, blah, blah, blah. It's rough. As far as promotion, promote everywhere. Promote on Facebook, promote on Twitter. But make sure that you're producing something that's promotable. Make sure it's something that's quality. Make sure it's something that people want. And try not to promote to people who wouldn't be interested. Again, I'll use the White Roof Radio example. I don't promote my show to people who drive Volkswagens because we talk about Mini Coopers. I wouldn't promote my show to people that sell vegetables for a living because we talk about cars. Does that make sense? So you want to try to promote to your niche for best results. And when your niche doesn't work, promote to everybody else. You can do PPC if you want. Just do keyword-based PPC. You can do a Facebook ad. Do like a $40 Facebook ad buy for a week. Get some more people on your Facebook page. Hopefully those people will turn into listeners, will convert. Right, because that's the end game, is getting people to download your show.
Yeah.
That's the product. That's your landing page. Right? Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Excellent. My name is Don Burnside. You can find me many places, but all of this thing that we talked about today is at imadeapodcast.com, including episodes that we've done, recorded, prior talks, all over there at imadeapodcast.com. You can search Don Burnside on Google and on the entire front page if you want to contact me. DonBurnside.com. That's the way to do it. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, for those of you who sat in on my Instagram talk yesterday. Anyway, thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.